they can. So I'm welcoming Simeon Bochev.
Thank you, Kyle. Wow, the botanist, that's a unique, I need to change my LinkedIn or something on that one. But I think we need to give Chris another round of applause because that was a great way to kick off the day. Thank you, Chris. Thank you. No, really. And, you know, I'm gonna take it in a different direction. I'm gonna tell you from my experience in the computing space that I think that AI is killing innovation as we know it. And I want to ask, who here is working on something they would consider innovative, novel, hasn't been done before in AI? Is anyone in this room doing that? Anyone? Behind the poll, you're building something, yeah? Well, I'm gonna let you in on a little secret. Your project's probably dead. I'm sorry. The person behind you who raised their hand? Someone else? Are you shy now? Oh, over there? Yeah, yours has also died. And it's true. And it's also unacceptable, right? I think we have to change this. It's more than a calling, it's a movement. It's a necessity. It's something that if we don't do this, AI will kill the innovation in this room, but also beyond this room. And we'll talk about why this is happening, because I expect many of you to be skeptical. We'll talk about what we should do about it, and then how we do that together. I also didn't get the clicker. It's over here, so I'll walk back. And so the thing is, it wasn't always this way, right? When we think about the internet, for example, this is a ubiquitous technology that not necessarily was going to be that way from the beginning. If we think back to the 1940s, when computers cost hundreds of millions of dollars or billions of dollars, and there was only one entity in the world that could afford it, which was the US government, right? They took up entire buildings. You know, if you were standing back in time back then, like my grandparents were, there wasn't a natural assumption that the internet would become ubiquitous like it has today. What enabled that to happen was companies like IBM, yes, IBM, coming in the 70s and 80s and commoditizing the cost of computer hardware. Companies like Intel creating the x86 and driving the price of processing power down tremendously. Microsoft driving the cost of operating systems down today to zero. And Ethernet, right, and networking, driving the cost down and creating an open standard. Ultimately, and for me the key concept here is, for a product like the internet, the way that you ensure mass adoption is by driving the cost of its complements down to its marginal cost and ideally to its commodity cost. And we did that with the internet. But in AI, it's different. Now, AI started in a better place, right? When we think of the complements of AI, they're data and compute, largely. You know, we have the transformer paper, attention is all you need, created by a private company, but in an open way, right? Imagine if that paper had never been published and that IP had been retained by the company itself. But that's not the world we live in. So AI was moving on a better trajectory. But like I was saying, it's changed. It's different now. It's different because the cost of AI is not hundreds of millions of dollars or even billions of dollars. As of Tuesday, it's $500 billion, right? The numbers just keep going higher. The capacity isn't there. Whether it's compute, there's 20 million chips in the world, 20 million GPUs in data centers in the world. I argue that's not even 1% of what we need. The power to power those chips is a fraction of what we need. The data, as many of you know, is nowhere near where we need it to be, and we're already running out of good quality digital data. And who controls those 20 million chips, right? Who controls what we call picks and shovels of AI? Well, they're not hiding, right? I think we all know who they are. This was on Monday, right? And then this was on Tuesday, right? But I'm not begrudging any of them, right? Because they're operating under the same constraints that we are. They are the ones that are actually spending the hundreds of billions of dollars. It's not us, it's them, right? They have the same capacity constraints that we do, but the one thing that they are exercising is their control, right? Which we, in many cases, don't have. To me, it's this world where cost, capacity, control are highly constrained that is what is killing innovation. And to paint it even more starkly, let's take the 5 billion smartphone users in the world out of 7 billion or so people. The AI optimists in this room would argue that to reach AGI, we probably need 1 GPU per human. Maybe more, but at least 1 GPU per human in the world. Let's assume some data or some GPU costs go down. They're not 44,000 a pop at some point in the future. And we'll conservatively say that'll be about $100 trillion of investment if you're an optimist. If you're a pessimist and you say, AI is important, but it's not transformational, okay, we'll factor it down by an order of magnitude. So from 100 trillion, we go down to 10. Well, at 10 trillion, fun fact, you're still 3 times larger than the oil and gas market is today, which is the largest commodity in the world, at 3 trillion. At 100 trillion, the 500 billion Stargate announcement, which was the largest capital project in the history of humanity, it's larger than the Apollo program, is less than 1% of what we need. Less than 1%. Even in the pessimistic scenario at 10 trillion, it is less than 10%. It calls for 9 million chips. There's 20 million total in the world today. Here we're saying we need in the order of magnitude of billions. The capacity is not there. What should we do about this? In my view, and I think it's why you're all here, we need to democratize the AI tech stack from the bottom layer with silicon to putting that silicon in servers and networking them together, to putting that into data centers and powering them, to the virtualization stack in the orchestration layer, to the basic cloud, and ultimately, of course, to the AI development platforms that many of you work on. And we see some companies who are here today that do this, right? Grok is innovating at the silicon level. Lambda at the cloud level, Anyscale at the application layer with its open source Ray project. But those companies in control have fully vertically integrated up and down this entire stack. And the competition is incredibly tough. Many of you are working at different layers here. And the part that I know a little bit about, which is compute, is where I want to zoom in. And frankly, there's plenty of things about compute that really just don't compute to me. I won't go through all of these, but one that's a particular annoyance for me is the third one on here, which is unused capacity. Pessimists believe that 10% of compute is actually effectively utilized. I'm not that negative, but I'm at 50%. Even if we were at 99% utilization, in the optimistic scenario, we're talking about waste on the order of trillions of dollars, right? To me, that's unacceptable. And one of the reasons we have such underutilized and poorly utilized capacity is because of heterogeneity of compute, right? Chris talked about A100, H100. Well, guess what? An H100 serial number 1 or serial number 1,000,000 is the exact same chip. But the moment you put it inside of Google Cloud or Lambda Cloud or someone else, it changes. The hardware changes and the software stack on top changes. And I know as a founder that many of you love those free cloud credits, right? You love them. And you think you're smarter than those big companies that have the control. Oh, I'm going to take them for free here, 300K, and then 300K, and then 300K, and I'm going to move and move and move. And then I'm going to get to product market fit, raise a lot of money, and I'm going to get off of the cloud providers. But it doesn't work that way, and I think you know it. You're going to move from cloud to cloud, and because they're heterogeneous, you're going to spend a lot of money moving from cloud to cloud. And then once you've moved through all the clouds and you have no more clouds to move to, you're going to be stuck on the last one, and they're going to jack up the price because they have to make the money back, and you're going to be paying 3 to 5 times the market price of compute. That's what really happens. That heterogeneity drives a lot of the unused capacity, as well as many of these other things. And so what I would propose is, it sounds simple, it's not. We need neutrality here. We need a neutral open standard, similar to Ethernet, similar to the Internet Standards Board. We need some kind of a neutral open standard for compute. And that goes from how do we orchestrate workloads so that we have less heterogeneity at the software layer, to more standards at the hardware layer as well. We also need neutral bodies that help us build transparency into compute, right? So we need to know, where are those 20 million chips? How are they being used? By which companies and entities, and for what purpose? We need access. Why don't we get a chunk of that $500 billion that the US government is putting its stamp on that's really going to benefit one major company? And then I would argue we need to be a lot more efficient. And I don't just mean around utilization. I mean carbon efficient because of all the power that's going to be created to generate the power for these data centers. I'm talking about efficient with how we design these systems and some of the work that people like Chris are doing. And these three words, again, sound simple, but they aren't. But I think if we do these three things, we can potentially democratize intelligence. We can potentially stop AI from killing innovation, which I fundamentally believe it is doing today. And if any of this has resonated with you, that's my LinkedIn. I hope you'll connect with me. I'll be at the office hours over there a little bit later today. And I've been working on something pretty exciting over the last year. I'll be sharing more about it next week. And if you happen to read about it and that resonates with you as well, I hope you'll reach out. Now, just being here means you're part of this movement or you relate in some way to what I'm talking about. And that's really the first step. And while I do believe that AI is killing innovation as we know it today, I'm optimistic. And I'm optimistic because this is the second Demi. This is the second Demi that is sold out. This is the second Demi where when people raise their hands and I said something negative, I'm pretty sure you're going to ignore me and you're going to go and build it anyway. And you're going to persist and fight and move forward. And when I think about the future, I think about those people like you, and I hope I meet you later, that are going to found things and that are going to work on democratizing that stack. And I really do think we can do it. Because in this case, even those companies in control, they're struggling too. So thank you, and let's do this together.
Cool. I think we'll open it for questions. If anyone has questions for Simeon.
Thank you, Kyle. Hi.
Hello. I had a question about like the fact that we all have these heterogeneous compute platforms. Like I have an AMD GPU, somebody else will have different, somebody has on the cloud and so on. Is it possible to leverage these without making it homogeneous in some kind of a distributed training platform? There
Yes.
are some things like that, and we can build on that without having a common standard, no?
Absolutely. I think that that is the natural first step, right? When something is so different, and let's just be clear about how different it is. Even if we're talking about the same chip, right? An H100, to keep it simple. An H100 with a certain network configuration in a certain location with a certain amount of memory, right? With a certain provider, even across those 5 elements, we're talking about hundreds of permutations, right? That's very far away from being something like oil, which has 5 permutations largely, right? So you're not going to go from A to B, well, I would actually say A to Z overnight. And a natural way to take a first step is to create a bit of an abstraction on top. But as with anything, when you create a little bit of an abstraction, you might lose some efficiency. And so there is a step, and it's part of what I'm working on, where that first level, or that first step, is that abstraction that we're working towards. Eventually, it would be great if those 5 billion GPUs that already exist in the world, right, can be connected, because when your phone is sitting idle at night, right, it's available. And you probably don't care, and you might even make some money off of it. So I agree with you. Oh, in the middle, okay. Trying to make eye contact.
Okay, great. Hello, my name's Michael Tsai at the Data Room on Twitter. I believe in open source AI freedom, which is why I'm here. So I really enjoyed your presentation. You mentioned how certain players are coming in and trying to say, hey, we're going to spend $500 billion on this sort of centralized AI, which Elon Musk says they might not even have. So if even some of the most wealthy and powerful people in the world are making this desperate play, how we are certainly far short of $500 billion. How are we going to, I guess, asymmetrically compete against that?
Yeah, it's a great question. So on the slide where I said does not compute, right? Mm-hmm. As we tackle each of those elements, for example, I'll keep beating the horse on heterogeneity. If we can move towards more of a standard, then we're not wasting money on things that eventually aren't going to be relevant or efficient. So, for example, Chris talked about CUDA, right? But there's also many other software layers on top of that. You don't have to create 10 different ways to do the same thing, right? Ethernet is Ethernet, right? And I would argue that the cost will naturally go down as we build those open standards towards something simple. But that's not going to take us from 500 billion to 5 million, right? There's also this concept of pooling resources. When we had, in the 1940s, the Manhattan Project, right? The government pooled the resources into that capacity. When we looked at the 60s and 70s around, around the Apollo project, right? It was the efficiency of one driving force that pushed it together. And so a part of it is making it less heterogeneous. A part of it is actually having sensible regulation. We don't have that right now. And there's really only one actor that can do that, which is the government. And in this case, as you've said, it's going to be difficult to move the needle there right now. But I'm fighting, and I hope others are. And I'd say the third one is, just like they're operating in the same system of constraints, even though they have a lot of wealth and power, we are the masses. We are, right? You can make a difference by saying, I'm not going to go take that $2 million a year job offer and work for one of them. I'm serious. You can make a difference by saying, I'm not going to go take those free cloud credits that are going to lock me in to this vendor and continue to give them more control and power. You do individually have a lot of agency, and if more of us use that agency, we can make a difference and move things.
Great.
And let's talk more. There's some things I would share with you that aren't super public.
Great.
Yeah.
Love to do that. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Charu. First off, really appreciated the conversation. I know you mentioned a figure about, I don't know how many trillions of dollars, but, it's really, really interesting. I completely agree that the information asymmetry is the problem at the core. And I also agree that we are empowered and we could probably do something different. So I really like that part of it. But first off, I guess the question is, what was the number that you said, like in terms of number of trillions?
Sure. So we can break down the math.
Yeah.
So today a GB200 costs $44,000. If we believe that we'll need one of those per human when we reach AGI,
Billion.
right? But then, right, so that's 7 billion people. So the math roughly comes out to $250 trillion. But I'm assuming that there's some efficiencies along the way. So I cut that down to 100 trillion. That's in the very AGI 1 GPU per person. In the other case where we're less optimistic, I'm saying cut it by an order of magnitude, right? So go to 10.
Got it. That makes sense. Thank you. It's also really interesting. I just looked this up, guys, but the GDP of the U.S. is 27 trillion, to put it into perspective.
Yes. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Marco. Thank you for your...
Hi, Marco.
Okay, so you portrayed this picture that since compute and data are in the hands of very few companies, you see that the innovation is not going so well and will not go so well in the future. So my question to you is, why don't you think that a small company can innovate on the algorithm side of the training or inference of these models, and hence beat big tech companies just based on that, without having an advantage in compute and data?
I think it's a great question, and we saw the model coming out of China, right? That's doing better than Llama 4, that's doing better on some benchmarks than O3, right? Here's why I'm more pessimistic. I'm not saying the probability is 0, right? And I was obviously being a little facetious when I said your projects are dead. I do think we're all facing an uphill battle. But if I were to bet, could a Google, a Microsoft, a Meta, an Apple that was started today by someone in this room be more or less likely to succeed compared to in the 80s and 90s? I think it is infinitely less likely to succeed for those reasons, but it's not 0. And so now back specifically to your question, my take is that we have had some of those innovations. I won't mention specific companies by name, but I can tell you privately. And what has happened? Those big companies have just bought them out. They basically paid them to stop working for themselves and to work for the big company, right? Mm-hmm. There's 3 examples that easily come to mind that happened in the last 2 years, where a Google, an Amazon, and a Microsoft each basically pseudo-acquired these companies that had developed an innovative technology. The last point I would make on that, and I'm probably over time, is take a company like Mistral or Cohere, right? Mistral is doing something, I think, very necessary, which is trying to build a counterweight to, let's say, an OpenAI or an Anthropic in Europe. I happen to be originally from Bulgaria, so there's a bit of like excitement in that for me. I don't think they're going to hit escape velocity. Despite all the funding they're getting, there's a lot of talk, right, about, oh, they're a great target for acquisition, which is why at Davos, their CEO said, no, we're not getting acquired, right? We're going to go public. Like, okay, good luck. I mean it, seriously, because you're not generating enough revenue to then go back in to pay for the compute and data that you need. And so you're actually moving more and more this way as opposed to this way. And so for all those reasons, I think it's not 0%, but it's definitely not as likely as 20 years ago.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. Thank you, Kyle.